Today is January 28th, 2018. I'm Tom. I'm here with John. Today we're going to talk about recreational drugs and should people ever use recreational drugs? You know, which recreational drugs should be legal, which should be illegal. I made a list of 7 of the most commonly thought about recreational drugs. So there's alcohol, marijuana, cigarette smoking, cocaine, heroin, meth, and LSD. I actually think that all recreational drugs should be avoided because I think they lead to too much addiction, too much suffering. They lead to death sometimes, they lead to injury, they lead people to commit crimes. I do think alcohol and marijuana should be legal for people 18 and over.
That's interesting. It's almost like you have more of a conservative standpoint on alcohol, but also a liberal standpoint in terms of the age.
Yeah, I think it's useless to arrest 18, 19, and 20-year-olds for drinking alcohol. I think they're old enough that they should have the legal freedom to do it, even though I don't think they should actually drink it.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. Because, I think the general idea is that your brain doesn't fully develop until you're like 24, and alcohol can be more damaging when you drink at earlier ages, so pretty sure that's the thought process behind it. So why would you think that's a bad thing? I kind of agree, and just because I think it leads to less glorification of alcohol. It's, in other countries, there's no drinking age, or the drinking age is much lower, and it's not as we have a horrible culture around drinking in the U.S. Because it's seen as it's seen as badass to drink when you're younger. It becomes like something, like smoking pot or whatever else. It becomes more attractive because it is not allowed. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think if we changed the drinking age, maybe people would be a little bit more intelligent about drinking too much when you're younger. If an 18-year-old, if it's legal to drink when you're an 18-year-old, maybe it's not such a allure to binge, whereas if you're breaking the law, it feels like somehow it feels more attractive. Like repressed countries, porn is way more viewed in repressed countries than other countries. It's like whatever you're not allowed to see, whatever you're not allowed to do when you're a kid, sometimes it's way more interesting, and yeah. So I think I agree with you that it should be 18, because eventually the culture will change around it.
I think we both agree that no one should ever smoke cigarettes.
I think we have to define recreational drugs too, because we were talking about this on an earlier episode, I think, where our brain is just filled with chemicals, and in certain drugs increase pleasurable chemicals, etc. You can get a dependence on nicotine. It's all just a chemical soup happening in our brain, right? That's the whole point of drugs. It's to change our brain state, to change your consciousness somehow, alter your experience. You don't take drugs to cure a rash. It's not like antibiotics or something. It's to alter your consciousness. But anyways, let me get back to what I was saying. So, is sugar a drug? Is drinking a soda can, is drinking a Red Bull, would you say that's like a recreational drug? Or highly caffeinated drinks?
No, I don't put soda or those caffeine drinks into the category of recreational drugs. The term recreational drug is a little vague.
Yeah, and we have to think about levels too. There's a large spectrum of adverse effects. Not all recreational drugs have the same impact or outcomes on happiness and suffering.
Right.
And there's often a lot of confusion around that. Many Republican lawmakers think weed is much more of a harmful. It's categorized in the same level as heroin, and that seems absurd to anyone who's looked at the differences between the two drugs. Eating sugary snacks lights up your brain, right? eating sugary snacks can be seen as a drug because it alters your experience. It makes you feel pleasure. It doesn't make you feel as much pleasure as cocaine, and cocaine doesn't make you feel as much pleasure as heroin. But the higher up you go, the worse the effects are. And then addiction's a whole other thing. Like, weed doesn't make you addicted. There's some argument about that and whether marijuana makes you physically addicted or like mentally addicted, but it's not addicted like nicotine where you actually, it's like a different type of addiction, if it is at all. But, yeah, so I think to just say all recreational drugs are bad seems a little bit like uninformed because each drug is so different, and and there's many different levels to them.
I am in favor of medical marijuana. I view medical marijuana as that's a medical thing. So I'm talking about just the recreational use of these drugs. I know they all
Many people use recreational drugs to treat something. In fact, I think that's the biggest reason why people drink alcohol or drink, alcoholics usually aren't, perfectly happy in their life and everything's going well. It's usually as a treatment. It's to forget pain. It's to ease suffering. I think a lot of recreational marijuana users actually use it for anxiety or use it to calm down in a social situation or just to relax. A lot of people smoke weed before they go to bed. So even though it's not medical per se, it's treating something to ease suffering.
Right, but I see a pretty clear distinction between recreational use and medical use. For me to consider it medical use, it has to be prescribed by a doctor and be, strictly a medical thing. So someone who's just drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana because they're feeling depressed or they're feeling anxious, that I would still consider that recreational. Like, it has to be prescribed by a doctor for me to consider it medical.
So, but that means you're against weed. You're against recreational weed, even though it has the same effect as medical in many cases.
When it's medical, it's for a different purpose. It's more urgent and it's more necessary when it's medical.
Oh yeah, but that's not necessarily true. What about things like Xanax and over-the-counter drugs that people abuse, like anti-anxiety pills, antidepressants?
That's not recreational. Those drugs are meant for medical use. You know what I mean? It's not like cocaine is not a medicine, right? Right, in any context. But I don't think anyone should abuse any drugs that they're prescribed.
It's tricky though. It is it seems like a little bit of a hazy issue because when does something become abuse?
When you're using it more than the doctor prescribed? You mean like an over-the-counter drug that you, like Tylenol?
Yeah. Well, what if okay, so you're just saying as long as you go by the scientific prescription, by what the doctor says, then you can't go wrong. But there's been cases where doctors overprescribe drugs, and that leads to addiction, some serious issues.
That's the doctor's fault. I think something like Tylenol or Advil or Aleve, I think you should use them very responsibly. Use it very conservatively. Only use it when you really need it. Go on the side of using it less instead of using it more.
Yeah.
What I see is just all these drugs are so risky, so just why take the risk if you don't need to? That's all these drugs have all these risks of causing so much suffering and health problems. I feel much more comfortable. I feel much safer only using drugs when they're necessary.
Yeah. Well, no, I totally agree. I think, it's tricky. It's you want to use drugs in moderation, but you also want to enjoy yourself from time to time. And I think we're might be focusing too much on the suffering end a little bit, because like a kid, like some kids passing around a joint at a party and having a good time. Would you say that's like abusing drugs?
Well, I don't think anyone should ever use marijuana recreationally. I'm not saying it's as harmful as cocaine or heroin, but I still think it's a little harmful. Just the risk. I think it has a lot to do with the idea of risk. There's a certain probability that something bad's going to happen when you use marijuana or alcohol, because they.
Yeah, I think that's actually. I think I hit the nail on the head, and I think you might be thinking about the risks of marijuana a little bit. I think you might be putting those a little bit too high. Like the risks of alcohol, in my opinion, are way higher than the risks of marijuana. I mean, for one, you can die by drinking too much alcohol, and you can become an alcoholic. Whereas with weed, it seems like it's much harder to become dependent on weed. And the effects of being on weed are much less aggressive and dangerous than being on alcohol.
Well, when your judgment is distorted, like if you're drunk or high, you're more likely to commit a crime or to accidentally do something. Not on weed?
No. Well, like the different drugs affect your behavior very differently. Weed just makes you want to chill and sit and talk with your friends and laugh. And usually alcohol's the same, but alcohol sometimes makes people aggressive. You have the bar fights, you have people running out of the street and going crazy, and what is it called? There's different terms for if a drug speeds up your heart or slows down your heart.
So, but what if you drive a car when you're high on marijuana?
Yeah, that's definitely more dangerous.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. So a certain percentage of the time, like if 1,000 people use recreational marijuana today, a certain fraction of those people are going to end up driving. Even if it's a very small fraction, it still is non-zero.
Yeah, but just because there's a small risk doesn't cancel out. Just because you have a small risk of killing yourself doesn't mean you shouldn't go snowboarding. Is that a metaphor way out of line? You know what I mean? Like for the sake of enjoying yourself.
Yeah, well, that's snowboarding as a sport.
You're causing physical, you're having mental joy of snowboarding, and when you smoke weed with some friends, it can cause, it can make you have a really good time.
Oh yeah, I totally recognize that alcohol and marijuana both cause a lot of enjoyment, but I think that enjoyment can be gotten in other places. It's not worth the riskiness of alcohol and marijuana, whereas something like snowboarding or skiing, I see it as a different kind of risk. There's still a risk of injury, there's still a risk of death. When I see it, it's something about putting a substance into your body when you don't need to. It just seems like it's in a category that you just should stay away from that.
That's actually, I think that's really, we're getting to some interesting stuff, because I didn't really think about that either. And I don't think it's actually that different, because it has the same effect. Like people, I think kids are going to find some way to get a thrill. So they're going to race cars down the road, and that's way more dangerous than smoking or joint and chilling. So what's so bad about putting this stuff into your body? Why is that specifically worse than like racing a car?
I don't think anyone should race cars in a dangerous way.
Right. But what do you think's worse activity? You think but you still think that like racing cars shouldn't be banned, right? It's not.
Well, it is illegal to go over the speed limit, so.
Right. But okay, well, let's just say other like activities, just like I don't know what do kids do. Like kids play paintball, and there's a risk of paintball, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just think there's like kids can get addicted to video games, right? When you say that, it can be chronically addicted to video games where it's not positive at all, where they're just they're so into this game that it's like they don't think about anything else, and it could be really detrimental to your social life. Not to say that gaming's bad, but it can certainly become bad if you're not managing. For me, I think it's all about control. If the weed is controlling your life and you don't have control over when you want to have it, or if you're playing video games and you feel like you have no control over when you play, then I think it can be very dangerous. You get sucked in and you become like a zombie in your own body. You don't have control over what you want to do or what you think is healthy. But I don't see putting substances into your body.
So video games, I don't know that much about the psychology of addiction, exactly how addiction works with video games, but video games is just it's an activity, you know, when it's something like a purely psychological addiction, like addiction to video games or addiction to watching horror movies, that seems like it's in a different category than alcohol and marijuana. Many activities have a risk of you abusing or getting addicted to the activity, but I draw the line when it comes to recreational drugs. I think all recreational drugs are just, the riskiness is too much. It's like, it's too risky and the harms are too great. So I just think it's best to just avoid them entirely.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I definitely think they're less risky than you think they are. But, you know, like, kids can be addicted, like, porn is a huge topic right now, or, like, with just access to unlimited porn, a lot of scientists are worried that kids are getting addicted, because it's the same thing. You're getting an emotional, you're getting a chemical reward for seeing pornography. Usually as, like, a testosterone-filled male, you get more of a reward than a female. But it's still like you drug because you get a chemical reward in your brain, and it's like I think it's really about controlling that reward process, because everyone wants to feel happy and feel joy, but if you keep on focusing on those short-term pleasurable experiences, you can end up hurting yourself in the long run, like an alcoholic. If you keep on just chasing that short-term high, you can, you know, get liver disease and destroy everything in your family and everything else. But I think if there's a control, I mean, if kids watch porn like within reason and enjoy themselves, that's great. And I think if kids smoke weed within reason and just enjoy themselves and doesn't have any negative side effect because they're in control and they're not going to drive after, then I think that's totally fine. I don't think we should ban porn to solve the issue.
No. I think porn is fine. I think this has to do with the way I see probability, because I think if 1 million people start drinking alcohol in their lives, a certain fraction of that 1 million people will inevitably become alcoholics. Just mathematically, you can guarantee that roughly a certain percentage will end up being alcoholics. And alcoholism is a very painful disease. It's you know, I don't want anyone to ever have to go through alcoholism, you know, when it's totally unnecessary. You never needed to drink alcohol in the first place. Alcoholism seems like such an easily preventable illness.
Yeah, and I would say it's a higher risk activity. Like, drinking alcohol is higher risk long term than watching porn. You know, like, there's differences.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, almost everybody drinks alcohol, right? Like, almost everyone on the friggin' planet. You know, Muslims don't drink in large swaths because of the religion, and I'm sure other people don't for whatever reason, but it's almost universal, so it's going to happen that there's going to be a lot of alcoholics, because, I mean, how many alcoholics do you think is the percentage from people that drink? Like, why should we punish every single person that drinks? It's probably 90% drink and they're totally okay with handling that, and it's just a good time. And then 10% become alcoholics, and it might be less, might be more, I don't know. But why should you think that's an appropriate measure, even because of that 10%?
Yeah, because alcoholism is so bad that I think it's just not worth it, even though the majority of people that drink never become alcoholics. I think the people who suffer from alcoholism, it's so painful that I think it would be better to, if no one drank in the first place, so we could prevent all those alcoholics from ever becoming alcoholics in the first place. What I'm saying is, I think it would be best if no one ever drank alcohol, and I know that me saying that right now is not going to prevent all these millions of people throughout the world from drinking alcohol, but I still think what I'm saying is true, that it would be best.
Too, like, and maybe 100 years we'll be so into the internet, and maybe we'll have digital selves, and we'll think about drinking alcohol as like ancient. It's like, you drank this liquid substance and it released neurochemicals to make you feel good. What the heck? I could see that. I mean, and I agree that it's not ideal. And I also agree that there's other ways to enjoy yourself that don't include alcohol.